Welcome back to the Historical Light Masonic Podcast. Tonight, we're going to be talking about something really special to Masons, traveling. And we have a brother on tonight that hosts a podcast all about being the traveling man. Maybe you've heard of the Traveling Man Masonic Podcast, and if you have, you're in for a treat tonight. We have that brother on, going to walk us through all about his show, his travels, and maybe some of the history that he's seen in those travels. So we got a great episode lined up for you right after this on Historical Light. Stick with us.
Welcome back to the Historical Light Masonic Podcast, dedicated to illuminating our past and bringing our Masonic history to light since 2016. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Historical Light, Masonic show focused on the historical events and aspects within Freemasonry. I'm your host, Brother Alex Powers, back for episode number, 117? And we got with us a very special guest with us tonight, Brother Jim Hall from the Traveling Man Podcast. My brother, thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Now, for anyone that may not know you, shame on them, go check out the show. But would you mind giving us a little introduction, just who you are and a little bit about your Masonic history?
Yeah. Obviously, Jim Hall. I'm a Mason just about 9 years. January, I believe. Hard to believe. It's like a blink of an eye. Past master of East Palestine Lodge 417 in Ohio in 2019. Current district education officer of the 24th Masonic District. And member of Youngstown York Rite, Valley of Youngstown Scottish Rite, Al Quran, and today I just got my Allied Masonic degrees invitation.
Hey, congratulations.
Pretty excited about that. Didn't know it was coming today, so pretty pumped. So that's kind of my Masonic backstory. I am a marketing and social media worker for an auction company, and I also am the director of programs for the Grand Lodge of Ohio. So I kind of do a dual work, but luckily I work at home and can split the time pretty easily.
That's fantastic.
So
I do marketing, and I do a lot of social media and stuff as well. So this very well may get off to a nerdy side tangent, just fair warning for everyone watching. But
I love it.
So I want to hit you with a couple questions just to get to know you as a person before we dive into the topic for this evening. But first and foremost, I'm always curious with our guests, do you have Masonic history prior to yourself and your family?
My grandfather was, and the only thing I remember, he passed away when I was a freshman. I can remember his Masonic ring, and my grandmother was in Eastern Star. And I can remember her vividly saying, "I have stars tonight." I didn't know what that meant at the time.
Right.
And he passed away before I was kind of age to ask what that was about. And he was old school. He wasn't telling everybody. He wasn't shouting from the rooftops, So other than that, no, I don't have any Masonic ties.
Very cool. So knowing your grandfather, not really knowing that connection of your grandmother there, what was it that made you decide to want to become a Mason? Was it that, or was it something else?
That has always intrigued me. I can remember that ring, can remember the car decals, and just driving through our small towns, and in East Palestine and Negley, they're 2.5 miles away, and they both have Masonic lodges. So we would pass them almost daily, and it would be, as I got older, you hear a lot of mysteries, as we, as we all know. And it was intriguing. I love history, and there was a common thread. It just kept coming up. And so it was always on my radar. It took me a long time to actually get involved because I didn't know how. And I wasn't overly pushing the envelope of trying to find out. I just was kind of, I don't know. So we'll figure it out when we figure it out. But that's kind of the reasoning.
Fantastic. So now that gets you your family backstory, and that gets you into Masonry. What's kept you around since you've gotten in?
I think knowing where the treasure is on the back of the Declaration of Independence, that was a big one. No, you know what?
You went to that meeting. All right.
I know. See, you guys get more involved and you'll learn too.
Yeah. Go to lodge.
That's right. No, you know what? It's the connections and fellowships. And we talked about this before. It's the Chad Kopinskis, the Jess Rainses, the Jason Laramies from Wisconsin. I'm contractually, I have to mention his name in everything I do. So if he's out there, he's a chairman of the Ed Committee for Wisconsin. So he may come up a little later, but it's all of those connections with the guys that I would have never met, never known, never realized how good they were, and then never realized how much they're contributing to making me better, and it just
most definitely.
And anytime I kind of wore out or tired of running with Masonry, because it is a run, like I'm sprinting everywhere, it seems like another connection pops up and that fire just gets lit up again. I absolutely love it.
That's a good problem to have. I mean, we all hear about, Masonic burnout, especially for guys that are really engaged.
Sure.
It's real.
Oh, yeah.
It's real. Well, fantastic, man. I am stoked to get to learn more about you and more about the show and everything that's brought into your Masonic journey. As we edge towards that topic this evening, I want to take a quick moment here just to give a huge thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. If you support the show, thank you so much. We've been around since 2016, and we are fully dedicated to that topic of Masonic history and illuminating our past. If you like what we do here, like what you see, you can help support the show by going over to the website, historicallight.com/support, or click support the show up in the menu bar there, and you can do so through Patreon and get all the awesome perks. We have various levels with various perks there, and help us keep the lights on. So we appreciate anything you're willing to do. So, my brother, the Traveling Man Podcast.
Yes, sir.
Now, when exactly did this venture start? How old is the podcast?
The podcast is coming up. It just went over 2 years old.
Happy birthday!
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Something I was just kicking around, and it's the traction. It's unbelievable. We just another thing at the time of, like I said, I'm a marketer, so I want to get Freemasonry out into the world. I want the guys like myself who spent the better part of 10 years not really knowing how, not that I was pushing to get in, but if I had an easy access, like a podcast or a Facebook page or something, I may have found Freemasonry a lot earlier.
Right.
So doing that, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, the whole meal deal, that was one of those things that just been kicking around a couple months. And finally I brought it up to my wife, and I think she just got tired of me talking to her about Masonry. And she'd be like, that's great. Why don't you talk to other people about Lodge? But that was it. In November of 2020, we kind of brought that up and went back and forth, and that was Christmas that year. I got 2 mics. I got the wrong mics. I didn't realize they were omnidirectional, so they were picking up.
You could hear everything.
The furnace, the water pipe, everything. So a couple episodes in, we traded those out for some Audio Technica, and But February 1st, we released our first episode. One upright regular step with Brother Ben Barnes. It's a horrible episode. Now that I'm, 48, will come out this Monday with Right Worship Brother Mike McCandlish. And listening back to that one, it's actually just hard to it's hard to go through. Like, wow, what were you doing? There's a lot of pauses and ums.
So, yeah, I mean, starting in these ventures, especially, I mean, technology is always growing, right? Like, we were talking in the green room before the show about taking on this monster that is TikTok. It's always evolving. Starting back with Historical Light, I remember the very first episode, and back then we weren't doing it live. It was recorded, and we were bringing guys in over Skype, and I was using this third-party software that would then, because I'm OCD and I had to edit everything meticulously, which still sucked. But I had this third-party software that let me instead of just one screen like this with two videos, would let me get the actual separate video files. So my very first episode was with David Harrison in the UK, and we talked for like hour and a half, 2 hours. It was excellent for a first episode, just phenomenal. Get off, thank him so much, click save, corrupt file.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you know how embarrassing it is to call him like, hey man, that was great. You mind doing that again tomorrow and just like pretend like we never did it?
Well, the funny thing, and I got in my notes here, which is a great segue right into that. Most worshipful brother Jess Raines was Grand Master of Ohio the year I was master in 2019. He installed me, and we kind of crossed paths a bunch that year. And he was kind of my highlight for the first season, is what I wanted to call it.
Okay.
Episode 15, and that was when I started talking about doing the podcast. They're like, don't load the front of your show with all the big names. You got to kind of space it out. And so it makes sense. So I'm like, all right, I'll wait till 15. And I drove out. He met me at Canton Masonic Temple, and it's about 2 hours for me and a little over 2.5 for him to hit there. And we recorded for over 3 hours, and it was the same thing.
Wow.
It was just unbelievable, the content. And we had another brother, worship brother Jim Seeley there, who was just watching, and he's like, I can't believe it was 3 hours. It felt like it was 30 minutes, just perfect. And same thing, thanked him, grabbed a bite to eat, went home. A couple of days later, I plugged the card in. Okay, where's the file at? And yeah, and I posted on Facebook, does anyone know how to get a corrupt file off of an SD card? And he texted me a few minutes later. He's like, I really hope that's not the podcast we just recorded. And so
Gotta love it.
So it took us, we end up sitting it back 7 more episodes. We let it sit so we wouldn't try to make the same thing and it wouldn't sound
right
real.
I had to see Brother Raines pop up in the comments over on Facebook. The lost episode.
The lost episode, episode 15.
Hey man, it happens. I've said many times, especially when we switched over to the live format, if historical light has its own history of anything, it's the history of technical difficulties. So it's real. The struggle is real.
Yes.
But let's get to know your show just a little bit better. So obviously it's called the Traveling Man Podcast. The Traveling Man is hugely symbolic within Freemasonry. What made you want to go that route specifically? And if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your show in general, what people can expect by tuning in.
Well, yeah. And you know what? The Traveling Man, I was kicking around an idea, like what do I name it? How does it needs to be something that is a little different than everything else because it doesn't want to sound like the same thing.
Sure.
And I can remember being at a district deputy of ours, John Martin, and somebody laid down their wallet and he's like, oh, I see a Traveling Man. And that had always stuck in my head. Might have been my first year in Masonry. And I'm like, oh, I like that. And that phrase doesn't come up as much as I'd like it to, I guess. So it's always stuck in my head as the Traveling Man. And I don't want to say I view myself as the Traveling Man, but we're all traveling men. And that's kind of part of it. And that's where the show came from. What to expect from the show is a conversation. And
I love it.
And I kind of looked at a lot of other shows, and there were a lot of different directions, whether they were Masonic history, deep esoteric, things like that. And I like a lot of that, but I don't delve that deep into it myself. I'll listen to presentation or comment a little bit, but it's just not my thing. I'm a BSer. I love talking. I love talking to staff. I love talking about life and what gets people excited. Why did they do this? Why did they stay? What did it feel like when you got installed as master in 2018 or, as Grand Master, or what did it feel like when you were not Grand Master the next year? There's so many different things, and it's just, what people were thinking. It's all the same, but it's always different. My journey and your journey, obviously we got to the same place, but how we did that will always be different. And what I take is one of the main things. You may think, well, I like that, but this was the main thing that was the driver for me.
Right. It's beautiful because obviously, Masons watching this can relate as, you get your third and you're able to travel around, even just in your local area, going to lodges on the other side of your city or even the other side of your state. A lot of these guys you'll know from seeing them maybe at annual session or just visiting other lodges and stuff. And as much as there's, Masonic lodges do a lot of the same stuff, right? We have the ritual. It's the same format, whatever. Each lodge also kind of has its individuality. Sure. So like you travel around, you get these subtle differences. And then not only that, you get to meet all these amazing brothers that have stories of their own, that impact their lodge, that will impact you. And I know even just at my home lodge, some of the most edifying conversations I've had is just on those random times. You'll stay after lodge and you just catch yourself sitting there talking to the 94-year-old that's been there forever. And you're talking about absolutely nothing. You just get into this mind blower conversation. So putting focus back into that, especially after a time like what we just went through with COVID, I think is tremendously important. And I love the connection it plays into the modern day, because what you and me are doing right now is traveling in a manner, right? Sure. But we're also not. No, but it's weird how brothers can connect.
It's unbelievable. And during COVID, we had a few different things. Actually, Most Worshipful Brother Rain set this up, where we would get on Zoom calls every Tuesday. Yeah. And it was just to see how everybody was doing, because we weren't going to lodge, and it's like a big black hole in my heart. I couldn't, that's kind of like my fortress of solitude. I go there and all the bad stuff goes away and I get to focus and get re-energized for life, And there were so many different guys from New York, Virginia, Vermont, Maine, all over Florida, every place, that even though we were going through this epidemic, which was terrible, I actually met a lot of guys that were Facebook friends, but I follow them now. Like, I'm interested in what they're doing and what, I can't be in Virginia, so Facebook's got to be it, But then the same thing with the podcast and the reach is just, people message me. It blows my mind. A gentleman messaged me from Australia, and for me, it's just, I'm putting out a podcast. I'm not thinking about Australia. I'm just trying to do the best I can, and to reach that far and spread that light of Masonry. That's something that really keeps me going.
Oh, 100%, man. 100%. So obviously, being historical light, we want to dig into a little bit of the history. And I know you've had this chance to do traveling in your Masonic career. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about some of the history that you've gotten to witness by traveling around and doing this in your Masonic career.
There's a couple highlights, and the first one will actually, my next podcast is coming out, episode 48, with Right Worshipful Brother Mike McCandlish, current Grand Orator of the Grand Lodge of Ohio. I traveled to Lancaster Lodge number 57 to meet up with him, and they have a Grand Master's apron from 1824, which in itself is really cool. It's that old, and I was, it was in a frame, but I was afraid to breathe too heavy. I didn't want to turn the dust anything. But the really cool part of it is, and if anyone's history buffs out here, Civil War, General William Tecumseh Sherman, his father, Charles Sherman, am I right? Yeah, got to make sure that was right. He was Grand Master of the state of Ohio in 1824. So they have his apron there. So that was a really cool. I didn't expect that to come up. He kind of left that out of the notes that I had for him. So that was a cool little side thing there. So many temples are just such beautiful edifices that, the Scottish Rite Cathedral in Indianapolis, we went out there for the Tri-Degree Day in 2019, and to be in their big auditorium and see that carved wood, and to think about the men that have sat in that room before me for, decades and decades. It's just, when you think about it that way, and you think about these different lodges, and even my own master seat in East Palestine, just the weight of Freemasonry, it's just, I don't know if people think about that as much, and it really hits home with me for that. But other things I've seen, we went out to the Masonic Temple in Philadelphia, and
that's an amazing one.
Actually, that whole trip, I have to go through the whole trip, and you have to bear with me because I just start running. You rein me in if you want, So I had the Grand Master of Pennsylvania, Jeff Wanderling, on the show, and we had talked, and we were going to go out the night before, stay, interview him in the morning, take the tour, and then kind of head out. In talking with the people at the temple, they said, if you're coming out the night before, why don't you visit a lodge meeting? There's a few lodges meeting that night. So we met Williamson Corinthian, excuse me. And, we're on the complete other side of Pennsylvania. So it's 6.5 hours, I think, drive time. And it was, it was just like going into East Palestine Lodge. Those guys welcomed us, wouldn't let us. We tried to put money into the kitty, to tip. They're like, no, you're not doing that. I'm like, you don't have to. It's all right. But, going there and just seeing some of the history, and, there's a letter written to that lodge from George Washington that was there. They sent a congratulations on winning the presidency, and he responded to that. So that was just how many times do you get to see a handwritten letter?
Right.
Washington,
No
the
doubt.
closest I've got to him other than that's the quarter. So, but then to go out there and see that whole building, to sit with Jeff and talk for over an hour. And then the thing that I love, and this is something with Grand Masters, purple of the fraternity, if you will. When I was first in lodge, it was, to me, a little intimidating to see these guys in big gold chains, and I don't know exactly what they're doing. Am I allowed to talk? Do I raise my hand? All of that. And the thing I love about it is, the more you talk to those guys, they're just like you and I.
Right.
And the cool part, at that time, we were finishing up the show, and I had two other brothers that had went out there with me, and they were waiting to go on the tour. And he came out and introduced himself, and he actually took us on like a little back tour of where the Grand Master's paintings are, and probably like 20 minutes of check this out, and if you guys are staying afterwards, he's like, I don't have anything for a couple hours, we could just go hang out. And that's a gentleman that I had only met once for about 20 minutes at an annual communication a couple years ago. Just, it's unbelievable.
Those are when some of the best conversations happen, man.
Sure.
But you mentioned that, and it makes me think. So yeah, like, we delve into Masonic history, and Freemasonry has some phenomenal names. I mean, you can go back and think about, Wilmshurst and Pike and Mackey, and just the list goes on and on. And while we get into these documents and we're reading like, oh my God, these guys were just larger than life. In the time, they were just another brother to so many men. Now, in their period, it was much different because they didn't have this means of communication and digital travel. And, so people would get to know them by their limited release of words, their publications, whatever. And it wasn't so much like, oh, yeah, I know Jem,
Yeah, exactly.
But it makes me wonder, like, if we had something more like audio or even what we're doing here back in those early days, I think it would blow all of our minds to get to know more deeply the personality, some of the traits, and just the rest of the story, between so many of these guys. Freemasonry today has something very unique with what we're doing here. And I don't know, 100 years from now, I don't know if it'll work for us or against us, but it's out there. We'll see.
I'm saying it's working for us. That's my call. So hopefully.
There you go. That's fantastic, man. So what, going through the Traveling Man podcast, one of the things I really admired, that I'm a little jealous of with this show, because my setup here is in my guest bedroom downstairs. I'm digital. I get to talk to guys all over the world. But one of the major differences is I see in so many of yours, you are in that temple. You've got your mobile setup. You're sitting there talking to the brothers face to face. And I'm a little envious of that. I think that adds multiple more layers to that conversation. And I mean, while you're talking about a certain lodge or whatever, you're there. How cool is that? How does that play into your conversations?
I try, if at all possible, to get to those places. There are some, I had Charles Ward on, he was in Alaska, just wasn't going to work. I pitched it to the wife. She wasn't down for it.
But it's a write-off.
Yeah, I should have said it. If I said he would have met us on a cruise, she might have went for it, but I wasn't.
Hindsight. Maybe next season.
Yeah. But, I love talking, like we're doing right now. This is great and live, so it's a little different than a Zoom. But there's just an aspect of being in the lodge, in
Definitely.
person. And I mean, same as I do when you're at a lodge and you're in the middle of that conversation and you can just feel it. You can feel that spark, and it just, whatever that Masonic thing is that gets going, it tends to carry over more when you're in person. I love it. I absolutely love that. I love to be able to look into the guy's eye, and you can read the body language of, okay, well, maybe this isn't hitting the mark here. Let's change the tune just a little bit of what we're talking about, or what, we're just really hitting it off here. We're going to scrap what we have next and just go down this rabbit hole. It's really a cool thing, and it keeps a lot of the guys comfortable. And
yeah, that's important.
I told you in the green room before this, I was nervous. This is the first time that I'm not the host, so I kind of feel like Ricky Bobby with my hands. Like, what do I do? I'm trying to question you, and I got to, pull back the reins. But you'd be surprised how many guys, you sit down, and the only difference is there's a mic. Everything else is exactly the same, and they start to really gum up a little bit sometimes. So being in that home setting can kind of calm that down, and after a few minutes, the mic disappears, and then we're just talking.
Right. So what I truly appreciate about that concept and what you're doing is, playing a little double-edged sword here. What this show focuses on is the past. And we're talking to guys of today and really delving into matters of the past, though. And while coming on, we got a little bit of your story and stuff. That's a little bit of today, but the majority of the show's the past. With you, so there's, when you get into history, there's this issue that we're facing, because guys like me are pushing so hard to preserve what we have because we're losing it again.
Sure.
But in that struggle, because we are so far behind on that, it's very easy to lose sight of that today, right now, is the history of tomorrow. Yeah. And in a large way, we're doing ourselves the disservice by not preserving right now. And we're going to be always playing that catch up. But by formats like yours and guys like you that are just willing to do something as, I'm not going to call it simple, but just to sit down and have that conversation.
Yeah.
You are effectively preserving the history of today. You're talking to today's Freemasons, having that conversation, breaking the ice between the two and actually delving into that conversation. So thank you for what you're doing there, because not enough of us are doing that. We often forget about today.
Sure. Well, I going through the show notes, I was looking and I'm like, okay, what historical things have I seen? And I'm thinking, because I want to bring up some good points because I want to sound good. And I kind of thought that, well, it's kind of each guy's history. It's each member's history, or the history of what just happened at the communication or installation or whatever it may be. So it's history on a small current scale, which, once again, it's so not groundbreaking that it surprises me that people just love it. I'm excited.
It's amazing because, I don't know, any lodge I've been to, and I think that's just the beautiful thing about Masonry. I think for every Mason, there's just something about Masonry that you can't always pinpoint or you can't always describe eloquently. No matter where I travel, it's like I have a great time. I have great conversations.
Yes.
You don't get to experience those unless you're there. And you got to think, well, those are happening all the time, all around us, all around the world right now.
Sure.
So it's amazing because while you're there and you got to partake in this little conversation, it seemed nothing to you because, oh, that was just Dale or whoever.
Yeah.
No one else got that. But
Right.
so many people can take away from those conversations. I mean, Masons love to talk, right? We
Yes.
interact very well with one another. But just by putting that out there, I mean, that's huge.
You know, that it's one of the things, the talking points, and you mentioned it earlier in the show about visiting other lodges, getting out,
Yeah.
seeing those lodges. The crazy thing, you know, for myself, my own journey starting, you know, I kind of had the lodge, and I was a shy guy at first. I really didn't do this. So I think that may be part of the amazement in myself of this show doing as well as it does, because I still think of me as quiet, shy Jim that didn't like to talk. And, you know, I started out with that core group of East Palestine guys, go to lodge, really enjoy their friendship, brotherhood. Well, then we started traveling to our district installations or inspections or whatnot. And the more I traveled, then all of a sudden it wasn't just East Palestine Lodge anymore. It was the 24th district guys. They were all my guys.
Right.
You know, and then, you know, just interacting with the podcast and different people across the state. You know, now it's when you get to go to the communication, like it's everybody, it's Ohio. These are all my guys. And that's the thing that just, I love that. And I try to get that across to anyone that is joining lodge. That's one thing that I tell them, and not to beat a dead horse, but what you put into is what you get out of it. If you don't show up, you won't ever know. And you'd be surprised what happens when you just show up. 90% of life is just showing up.
That's so true. That is so true.
So that's one of the cool things with it that is blows my mind every day when people comment and say, hey, I listened, I love this, or I'm driving and I put it on going to work. It's very humbling that they want to listen to me, because when I listen to me, I'm like, oh my God, you sound terrible. You know, your S's kind of slur a little bit, and you're, but you know, it's a cool thing, and I love it.
That's fantastic. I'm peeking over here at the Facebook comments. We got a lot of fans of the Traveling Man podcast jumping in here. We got Brother Jay Clark on here saying, hey, Jim, I love you.
Yeah, Jay's man. What's up?
Let's see.
Best.
Brother Clark also said, brother, we are going to have to talk after, and welcome to AMD. Congratulations,
all right.
By the way.
Jay's the kind of guy that it's a 15-minute call that's 3 hours. So, Jay,
right?
give me a call tomorrow, man. Not tonight.
Let's see. We've got Brother Higgins on here, Brother Richardson, Brother Clark, Brother Wells. Good evening from Mount Olivet, 226, 9th District.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Brother James Richardson says, I've been to Philadelphia Lodge, such a phenomenal building. I would love to attend a meeting there. That would be phenomenal. Unfortunately, so much in my travels, it's always on an off day or something. I'll, usually get to see the building or talk to some brothers, but I rarely get to attend lodge in places that I visit. How's that been with you? You get to go around a lot of these lodges. Have you been able to actually attend meetings at a bunch of them? Or?
No. And it's the same thing, with work and, life. I have a 12 and an 8-year-old son, so they're running all the time too. So trying to keep tabs on what sport they're in or what they're doing. My oldest he has the first degree of DMLA so that's exciting. And then football got in the way of the next degree, but Chris Gillum, I guarantee you we will be back. And I apologize if you're listening right now. So a lot of that time is, I went on Black Friday and met up with Mike McCandlish because I knew my wife was out all day shopping and we weren't really going to do anything. So I shot down there, and that was during the day. So I didn't get to experience lodge for that. The nice thing is sometimes with my Grand Lodge job, I can kind of fashion that into doing that, but I don't do it that often just because of how much I'm traveling as it is.
Sure.
So it was kind of a nice experience to get that Philadelphia one and get out there and be in a different state. That was pretty cool. But the majority of them are, just if I'm traveling somewhere for that degree, that's when I get to see them. Normally it's on off times too.
Right. Right. I know for me, I've had some blessings of situations, going up speaking at Attleboro Lodge, Massachusetts, with RJ out Chicago, and just kind of all these places. And, oddly enough, some of these events have happened at times that, as we were talking earlier about kind of revitalizing that spark and avoiding that burnout. And there was definitely times where I was sluggish, I was burning out, and being able to travel and get out and meet other brothers, see how things are done, the differences in so many levels in Massachusetts and Chicago and all these different places, just really hit that on switch for me and just, really brought things around. With your show, your opportunities to travel, brothers you meet through the show and digitally, how would you say those means of traveling have impacted your Masonic journey?
I think huge. And it's the kind of thing when you're so plugged in, and I don't want to say I'm more plugged in than the normal Mason. I do a lot with the podcast and social media and whatnot. There are times when I just don't want to post, or I don't want to edit, or I don't want to record. Sometimes it's easier just to sit in the basement in my shorts and, watch TV, watch the new whatever's coming out on Netflix. But it's, listening to these guys' journeys, and they're so passionate about what happened, or who led them to Masonry, or what happened in Masonry that was, some of the things really pull on your heartstrings. It's really amazing what some guys have went through or, met and seen in the craft. And that's the kind of thing that continues to push me to keep going. And it continues to make me want to spread that light to those guys that may not have found it or don't know how or aren't sure what Freemasonry is. If they can listen to the podcast and say, oh, you know what? I've known Rube Ginder for 20 years and didn't realize he was a Mason. Masonry sounds pretty cool. He absolutely loves it, but he never wears a ring or a decal, so I wouldn't know about it. If that brings somebody into lodge or gives them that vehicle to get to lodge, then I've done what I needed to do.
Oh, 100%. So we've talked a little bit about some of the places you've traveled, if granted, not to piss off the wife too much, but if you were able to go anywhere you wanted, where would be the next place you'd travel to?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I didn't know this one was coming.
And if there needs to be, there'll be a cruise involved. That's fine.
So, yes. You know what? I would love to go to Freemasons Hall.
Yes.
In the UK. I've just, in following it, it's been one of my goals to get them to follow one of my lodges here, social media wise. I haven't got them yet. I'm working on them, but if you're out there listening, follow me, please.
There you go.
But it's, and just watching the Netflix Inside Freemasonry that they did and talking to those guys, there's, same here. There's so much history there, and it's the same, but it's not the same. So I'd love to see all those little nuances and differences that, go different jurisdictions, different countries to that fact. So I think that would be pretty cool. And I've had a few guys that have traveled over there, and they speak about the harmony afterwards and the fellowship, and it really hits a chord that I'd like to do that. So
I agree. Yeah.
I could do a cruise to that one too. There
you go. Cruise right across the pond.
Yeah.
No, that as much as all of our Grand Lodges are separate now, it's still kind of the Mecca in a lot of ways, right? Like Freemasons Hall, like everyone wants to get there, and they do a phenomenal job over there, especially as we were talking about their social media and other aspects of what they're doing. They're killing it. I would totally love to get over there one day. I agree with you on that. It'd be nice, really nice to see. I know you had mentioned Brother Ward from Alaska, and man, he's a traveling man of himself.
Yeah.
So we did MasonicCon Kansas last year, and he came down all the way from Alaska to MasonicCon Kansas.
He shot me a message, and I know I'd sponsored the podcast.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
And no problem. And he messaged me. He's like, "Hey, are you going to be going to this?" And it was funny. Normally, my wife actually is super cool with me traveling the majority of the time. I don't want to make it sound like she's an old McGrudgeon, but the big travels, Kansas, that's a big one. To Columbus isn't, it's 3 hours or whatever, but that's not your life,
Right.
And she actually brought up, she's like, "You should probably go out to that." I'm like, I wasn't, and I never planned on it. I'm like, I was just going to do the sponsorship, and I don't want to get too crazy. I don't have any banners. I didn't have lapel pins at the time. And, I'm like, I'd just stand out there. I wouldn't have anything to give out. So I said I wasn't. And that's when he messaged me like 2 or 3 days later. And he's like, "Are you going down?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "I saw your sponsor and I thought you'd be there. I thought we could meet up." And, it's unbelievable to see the amount of traveling, to move back just to Alaska. That state is unbelievably huge. I didn't think about it until I was having him on the show and started looking at it. And then, talking with him, in some of those places you have to take, there are not roads. You have to fly out the places. You take boats. It's like, wow.
Yeah. It adds a whole nother level to it.
Yeah. Like, kudos to you for traveling. That's a real traveling man,
Oh, so here's your traveling's getting thrown a little under the bus. Brother Chad is saying, so you are coming to MCME, right?
Yes.
Midwest Conference Masonic Education.
I will most definitely be there. Don't worry, Chad.
All right. Chad, he's on the list, man.
Yeah.
And also, how's the chickens doing? Just wondering. Wondering.
Just throwing it out there, Chad.
Let's see. Very cool. So what do you have in the lineups coming in the near future? What episodes can we expect?
Well, and you know what? That's the crazy thing about it. My wife, we talk a lot about the show, and I don't have a co-producer or whatnot. It's kind of all me. So I'm usually banging thoughts off her and what she thinks, and back and forth. I have a list of potential people, and that's where I keep it. And I try to keep it as dynamic and as to the cuff as possible, because if I schedule you out, let's say if we did this 6 months from now, we recorded right now, so I could get a heads up on it. Well, who knows what may happen in that 6 months that would be ground shifting your Masonic journey that we missed. And then by the time the show comes out, so I have a few guys on the list. Keith Manbeck, if you're listening, he's the current Grand Tyler. We got to talk at communication. He said he was waiting for his invite, but he's going to be on there. And that's one of the things, especially with like Mike McCandless, the Grand Orator. Up until Mike, I've either had current Grandmasters or past Grandmasters when you get into that Grand Line stage. And I hadn't had anybody on the show that was in the journey of journeying through those appointed and then elected Grand Officer chairs. And, you don't realize that you sit in your lodge and you go through each chair and you do your work and you move up, and there's certain things that you need to get done to move them to the next chair and all of that. Well, it's the same thing in the Grand Line. Each one of them have their certain things that they need to do, and they got to get it right. And you're not guaranteed to get appointed. And once you move into elections, really anything could technically happen. We normally keep everything moving forward, but anything could happen when you're getting elected. So it was really cool to get that perspective of somebody that's started the journey but isn't at the finish line yet, and what he's thinking and what he's went through. And he's kind of smack dab right in the middle. So that's pretty cool. And other than that, I try to find, I'm lucky enough that I talk to a bunch of people just normally. So they always it's almost like they're stunned that I'm asking them to be on the show. And it's usually just random. It's no rhyme or reason, which doesn't actually make much sense. I should have that out better, but it's how the process works, and it's been working so far.
It works, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So question for you.
Sure.
If you could do one of your episodes on this Traveling Man podcast with a historical Masonic figure, who would you bring on the show, and what would you talk about?
Wow.
So many conversations to be had.
That is... Oh, you have me stumped.
It's a tough one. I get asked this question a lot, and I sit there and stumble.
Yeah, give me an answer.
I don't think I've ever answered it the same.
Okay.
It's honestly one of those. Like, I think any time I've ever answered has been a different thing, because it happens to be what my interests are of that moment. I want to have a conversation with everybody. I love to learn about all these individual brothers, their impact in history. Like, it all plays to the larger puzzle, I guess. So, I mean, I'd want to talk to every last one of them. As far as the main one, oh, good God, I don't know.
Actually, it just hit me. So I'm glad you gave me a minute there. We have an educational society called the Royal Schofield Society in Ohio, and it's branded after Most Worshipful Brother Royal C. Schofield, past Grand Master of Ohio in 1974, and actually from the 24th District of Ohio. I never got to meet him. He passed before I joined, but everybody said that he was one heck of an individual. And when they started the Schofield Society in 2019, and you have to have 15 different steps you have to get accomplished to be inducted into the society. You have to travel certain places in your district, outside your district.
Okay.
You have to do different paperwork, different research papers, and then it all culminates. Yeah, it's one of those words. I'm not going to get it tonight. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Hey, that's why I told you in the green room beforehand. This is why we went live, because if that was recorded, that'd be like a half hour of me trying to get that right.
Splitting that up, but you have a masterpiece, kind of like your keystone and it's completely up to you what it is, and it has to give back to the fraternity, and it has to be something that is meaningful. And I actually was able to I completed all those my master year in 2019, got inducted into the first class of the Schofield Society. And when I got back to my home lodge, our secretary had a bourbon snifter or whatnot, and it actually had the Grand Lodge seal, and it had Most Worshipful Brother Royal C. Schofield, 1973-74. And he said, I'd been saving this because I knew you were going through this journey, and I wanted to present it to you. He had these made when he was Grand Master, and I saved one. So it sits on my shelf with my Schofield medal and whatnot, and I think it would be really cool to have a drink with him in that glass and kind of just talk about what he went through. And he was a big proponent of Masonic education, so kind of see what he was about, and so that would be a good one.
100%. So sitting here kind of thinking more about mine in this moment, because, like I said, every time I've answered this, it's been a million different ways. But on my mind right now, I think it would be Prince Hall.
Oh, yeah. That'd be awesome.
Especially if it could be in a matter of me today, like knowing today's world and talking to him. I would love, first and foremost, to be able to sit down with him and actually see what he looks like. Because we don't have that historical knowledge of what he actually physically looked like.
Yeah, sure.
But I would love to just pick his brain on what he went through, on the variations, the developments, and then his opinions and thoughts on where Masonry's come and where it is today. Like,
absolutely.
What a beautiful conversation that would be.
Yeah. What his visions for it was and what he thinks about where it went. That'd be cool.
Yeah. And how wildly off course we are. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah, it was so right. And then you took a left turn and here we are.
No. I think we've got some really special stuff in today's world with the various, I mean, there's so many Masonic podcasts today. Oh. And, you know, as we were talking about kind of today being the history of tomorrow and preserving that, the beautiful thing about podcasts is, well, at least in the Masonic niche, everyone is trying to take different points of view.
Right.
So all these guys having various conversations about different things. I'm talking about history. You're talking about today. We got all these different avenues coming in that Masonry is being preserved today in a way that it never has before.
Absolutely.
I mean, kind of that double-edged sword we were talking about. I mean, some of Masonry's history is so well preserved in thought out and crumpled up and rewritten 5 million times, you know, pieces of verbatim verbiage.
Right.
Today we've got raw, real abundance.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, though, with it being so raw and it being so abundant, Masonic education has come out of that like never before. And we have had conversations to depth so many times over that I think we have uncovered to levels things that we've never delved in before. And we've got guys coming to Freemasonry already more knowledgeable in so many of these areas than so many of the, you know, top ranking nerds that we had in the past.
Sure.
Which is beautiful because it really challenges what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I had to ask you, let's say 50 years from now, what do you think we can expect out of Masonic conversation and Masonic travel? How do you think it's going to be impacted and change?
You know what? I think to some extent it will have to change, but I think there will be a continuation of what we're doing here. And I don't think overall it's going to change that much, because although, you know, the political field may be different, or, you know, a sporting event or whatever's happening in the world at the time, Freemasonry is still there. We're still built on those same virtues. So even though the world may be wildly changing and podcasts may go from watching over Skype to watching in a neural net link or whatever.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, it's just going to be in your brain.
Like, all I think about is, like, did you guys ever see Terminator? Like, we're going that way. Like, this is Skynet. I know it. You know, but I think that even though the world will change and we have to evolve, I don't say we don't not need to evolve. That has to happen. We still have to be relevant. We need to be out in front of people. If we stay behind our own doors, then we fade away into nothing, because there's so many other avenues people can go and do that we need to be out there. But as for the conversations, I think that, you know, those will stay to an extent.
That's beautiful, man. I can't wait to see. We've got a couple guys here talking about that very question that you and me just bridged about who we would go back and have that conversation with. We've got Brother PJ Higgins saying Harry Truman would be a great one. He was a very active member.
Yes.
We've got Brother Chad himself saying, I'd love to talk to Royal Schofield. I wonder what he would think of the Royal Schofield Society. That's, I mean, exactly. Like, where it started, where it's come. What's your thoughts? Like, those would be fantastic conversations to have. We've got Brother Ryan Longer on here saying mine would be George Washington.
Sure. Absolutely.
100%. So I've told the story on here before, but when I had the opportunity to go up to Attleboro, we went to the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And Brother Walter Hunt, the Grand Historian there, is an amazing guy. He's showing us around, first showed us around this building that just seemed to never end. That place is amazing.
Right.
And we're digging through his museum and library down there. And I'm seeing all these books open with different old Masonic certificates and stuff. And I'm seeing a very common theme that I've seen before, but never in person, where it's, the seal and a lock of hair. I've seen it before, but I've never seen the old lock. I mean, these are, old documents and locks of hair. So we're talking about it, and he's telling me, it's like hair was a big deal in the time, and it was often a way of kind of giving yourself to the craft. And then he flips open a book and shows me an urn made by Paul Revere that has George Washington's lock of hair in it. I'm like, whoa. Never knew that existed. I felt horrible as, a history nerd. Didn't know that was a thing. And he's like, yeah. I was like, where is it? He goes, oh, it's downstairs. I was like,
it's just downstairs.
Can I see it? He's like, oh, no. He was like, only grandmasters get to see that like once every so many years, and it's not a thing.
Wow.
And I see him go over and he asks this guy, and I just hear no. And he looks at me. I'm like, no, don't worry about him. I wasn't trying to, get anyone in trouble. Like 15 minutes later, this group of suits walks in, and they're holding it. And he's like, come on over.
Get out of here.
They hand it to me. Yeah, they take it out of the case, and they freaking hand me this urn, handcrafted by Paul Revere.
Oh, my God.
And they take the little top off, and sure enough, there's a piece of glass encapsulating a lock of George Washington's hair. My mind was blown. They let me hold this thing and get a picture with it. And, I posted afterwards, and everyone's like, oh my God, I've only heard of that. I've never seen it. And you're holding, I'm like, I didn't even know it existed until 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, that would be a cool conversation. George Washington, like, hey man, I've held your hair before. Let's have a chat.
Wow.
That's good. Well, we are coming up on the end of the hour here, and we always do our 9 o'clock toast. We're a couple minutes till. So right before the toast, I want to hand it over to you. Any final thoughts that you'd like to bring up about the show, about the history you've experienced, or just anything?
You know what? It's just been absolutely humbling, the amount of people that have reached out, and it gives me that drive to keep going, to keep spreading that light. And, if I can spread that light to somebody that hasn't found it, or to somebody that's, maybe they can't get to lodge because of work or whatnot, but they can listen to the podcast, enjoy Masonry that way. I'm just glad to be able to do that, glad to be a part of their lives and spreading the craft.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah. I'm right there with you. Let's see. Well, we're waiting on that toast. We've got a couple more comments coming through here. We've got Brother Paul Phelps saying that he would talk to Albert Pike. That's definitely a conversation to be had. Brother Timothy Klein saying Red Skeleton.
Yeah, Tim. What's up, Tim?
John Clark on here saying, I have been to the Philadelphia Lodge. I have a wish for all brothers in having an opportunity to visit. It is a magnificent and most beautiful of lodges. You can go on the tour of the different rooms, and in the tour with a visit to the museum. And I had to extend the text there, so I got lost. At the time, I was an entered apprentice, now being a master mason and increasing in knowledge while furthering my travels through the Royal Arch. I am eager to visit again and bring other brothers with me. That'd be fantastic. That's one I haven't been to in person. I definitely want to go see that. So, Brother Hall, you've got that up on me.
Yeah, you need to do it. It's unbelievable. It's really cool. You go to each one of the rooms. If you haven't, you might have already heard this. But each one of their lodge rooms, they have 3 or 4 different imperfections. Like,
really?
Things are done wrong because we're not perfect ashlars, So
Dad, I like that.
We were in the Egyptian room for Williamson Corinthian Lodge. And, I'm trying to really be focused on the meeting, but the other half of me is looking at every corner. I'm like, all right, I got to find this before they tell me, that's my, Indiana Jones in me, but
100%.
I didn't find it. they had to show me.
That's a beautiful concept. Let's see here. We got Brother Rain saying Walter Hunt is a amazing historian. He 100% is. I have had some very nerdy conversations with Brother Hunt. He's a great guy. Brother Chad, or an original sword, keep scrolling on me. Original sword given to Roos of Putnam by George Washington. Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Brother Wells says Marinee Ross or Dave Thomas, sorry. Yeah, some great suggestions there for conversations to be had. Well, my brother, it's the 9 o'clock hour. Traditionally on Historical Light, we bring things to a halt with a 9 p.m. toast.
Sure.
Would you be so kind in leading us with a toast this evening?
Absolutely. And I have to bring up Tim Klein. I have a Forest City Lodge with 1R Forest City glass that I got from their Brotherhood night last year that I'll be using. And the toast tonight, I said it was a little bit sci-fi-ish, and I'm on a Trek thing right now. So to the undiscovered country, and for people that aren't Trekkies, that's the future. So
love it. Cheers to the future. Fantastic. Brother Hall, it has been a phenomenal conversation. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and share a little bit about your show, your history that you've experienced, the history you're preserving through it, and just thank you honestly for all that you do.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm absolutely honored, and it's the same to you. Thank you for what you're doing. I'll throw my host hat on for a second, but in truth, and not, it's everybody that's out there. This is what Masonry needs. We need to have people that want to shout it from the rooftops, and that's how we get some of that enthusiasm back and get other people enthusiastic and excited about it.
100%. Well, before we sign off here, I think we need 2 more shout outs that are well earned here. For one, my wife, Yvette, she's always sharing out these episodes. Every time I go live, she's up there clicking away on the computer, getting this out to all the groups, to helping us help Historical Light get out to all of you clicking on. And I know you talked about the same as you're planning your episodes. You're bouncing stuff off your wife and always having those conversations. And that support plays huge into what we're able to do, the time that we're able to invest in these very shows. I want to give you an opportunity to give your wife a shout out too, because she definitely deserves it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bree. I appreciate you letting me do Masonry, and I appreciate you knowing that it's something I love and it's something that's dear to my heart, and going along for that ride with me. So thank you.
Fantastic. Brother, thank you again so much for joining us this evening, and thank all of you for joining us live. Man, keep illuminating the past. We'll see you guys later. Go hit us up in the Historical Light Masonic Research Group on Facebook. Till next time, keep preserving history. See you guys.